Well, greetings. Pastor Velcro back with another in the Survey of the Bible series. This one is on the books of poetry, as the title says. I don't know why I always tell you what it is, because the title tells you what it is. But just in case you didn't read it, then how would you get here? Oh, never mind. The 5 books of poetry provide a little bit of history, but they're more of a look at the culture of their time. They're poetic sometimes, more often narrative, but they're called poetry because there's, emotion in there. They appeal to your emotion, your imagination. A large segment of these books focuses on sharing the majesty of God, and that's a major theme in these. These books are sometimes called the books of wisdom or the books of writings. The Pentateuch established the law, in a lot of history. The books of history recorded the changes going on in the nation of Israel. But the books of poetry are an emotional response to God, God's laws, everything they've been through. They were written roughly around 1500 BC to maybe 1900 BC. There are 5 of them. The book of Job is 42 chapters long, probably written around 1500 BC. The author? Probably not Job. We'll come back to that. The book of Psalms is 150 individual psalms. And by the way, individuals are called Psalm 23. The book is called Psalms, and it doesn't have any chapters. They're all psalms that are labeled like chapters. It was written about 1000 BC. Was it written by David? We'll come back to that. The book of Proverbs, 31 chapters, written about 950 BC. Plus or minus a little on Psalms and Proverbs. And Proverbs, like the next 2 books, probably written by Solomon and somebody else. We'll come to that. Ecclesiastes, 12 chapters, written about 935 BC, probably near the end of Solomon's life. Song of Solomon, 8 chapters, written about the same time as Ecclesiastes, near the end of Solomon's life. So let's start by talking about the book of Job. Probably not written by Job. It was probably written long after his death, probably passed through many generations. The author was definitely an Israelite who did an excellent job of keeping the conversations in the language of Job's day. The author is credited by linguistics experts as a literary genius for the quality of his writing. In fact, the book of Job probably lived about the time of Abraham. And here's the thing. If it was written hundreds of years later, the author had to write it in the language of Job's day, not just in the language of King David's day, for instance, or maybe somewhere during the period of the Judges. I don't know. So the author did a great job, really did. Textual evidence suggests it's dated about 1500 BC, somewhere around King Solomon's time. Job provides an interesting challenge for translators. That's a polite way of saying they don't agree with each other very often on this one. The language that's used contains a lot of words that don't appear anywhere else in the Bible and are seldom found in any other documents that we have, what few we have from way back then. So the book of Job, as you probably all know, it deals with the story of a man who endures tremendous suffering. Yet even when his friends encourage him to curse God and die, he will not do so. In Job, we Also see the reality of Satan, his ability to affect our lives. This book is an encouragement to people who are suffering. It tells us that we are able to endure more than we thought we could. Do you remember the story of Job? That you can endure more than you thought you could, and that's what he went through. The culmination of the book comes when God himself answers Job. The end result is that Job is blessed with even more wealth, and his faith is not only justified, but almost certainly greatly strengthened. The book of Psalms is totally different from the book of Job. Practical wisdom to help you live a happy life and successful life with a strong relationship with God. Well, David did write quite a few of the Psalms, probably the largest number. Truth is, most scholars think he wrote less than half of the Psalms. The traditional Hebrew title for this book is Tehillim, which means praises, although many of the Psalms are Tefillat, meaning prayers. The title of Psalms was given by the translators of the Septuagint. Remember, Jewish scholars working in Egypt before the time of Christ, and they created the Septuagint, the Greek version of the Hebrew scriptures. Some of the Psalms may have been written hundreds of years before the book was assembled in its current form, or something close to what we're used to. It may not have been actually compiled until as late as 500 BC. It's often called a collection of collections because the various groupings would lead us to believe that it is simply that, a collection of collections. It's a fascinating study of linguistics and styles if anyone is interested. The book of Psalms, depends on what Bible you are using, it will say this group, and it's divided into these collections of Psalms. And there are several collections. One thing that's in there is a term Selah, or Selah. It's not known really what this word means, but the most commonly accepted thought is that it indicates a musical interlude, maybe a key change, maybe a pause. At any rate, scholars tend to think it had something to do with the music that these psalms would have been sung to. The book of Proverbs is 31 chapters of very short sayings of practical wisdom. 31 chapters. If you read one chapter per day in a 31-day month, you've read the whole book of Proverbs. Not a bad idea to do that once or twice a year. It's the book is full of a great deal of wise teachings. In fact, it's often referred to as the book of wisdom. 1 Kings 4:32 tells us that King Solomon authored 3,000 proverbs. It's likely that he was author of most of this book, although a few are attributed to others, especially the last couple. Almost certainly the book was not compiled until sometime after Solomon's death, probably 200 to 300 years after he died. Proverbs uses very figurative language extensively. Many of the Proverbs are written in contrasting pairs. They present two different views on a topic. It has some longer discourses, but the largest section consists of short sayings. A major theme throughout is fear of God and his place as the creator and his complete knowledge. One who reads the Proverbs and takes them to heart will develop a godly character. Ecclesiastes deals with the meaning and purpose of life and the existence of evil in our relationship to God. The title of the book is taken from the beginning of the book, and I'm going to butcher this one in Hebrew, Koheleth. The word is used to indicate the assembly. And it's the root for the one who speaks to the assembly. The author, almost certainly Solomon, begins by speaking of all he has accomplished. And think about King Solomon, wisest man of all time, richest man, maybe of all time, adjusted for inflation. But everything he accomplished, and yet he found no satisfaction. As tragic as that seems, the conclusion he draws at the end is that man needs to seek God in order to find satisfaction. And that's wisdom. Song of Solomon is also called the Song of Songs or the Canticles, which means chant or song, or it's from the Latin word for canticulum. The term Song of Songs in Hebrew would imply the greatest of songs. Some Jewish scholars compare Proverbs to the outer court of the temple, and Ecclesiastes to the holy place, and the Canticles to the holiest place. Some ask me why it's included. Solomon's song is a love song regarding a relationship between a man and a woman. It is sometimes interpreted as an allegory regarding God's love for his people. From a viewpoint of poetic style, it is considered an outstanding work. Many consider the book somewhat embarrassing because of its dramatic language regarding romantic passion. Just so you know, a lot of, how do I say this politely, modern translations, they have downplayed the sexual implications in the book of Song of Solomon. If you read it in the Hebrew, and I did take time to go through it slowly, it's pretty graphic. But then again, until fairly modern times, and even today in our culture, sex is not a 4-letter word. But when most of our translations were done, Christians tended to think sex was a 4-letter word. So they don't like this. So, if Job was written, I said he lived probably during Abraham's time. That's a study by itself, not a long one. Ask me about it. It was probably written more like during the time of Moses, maybe Joshua, the Judges. Don't know. But King David, so Abraham, 500 years later, Moses, 500 years later, King David, and, less than 100 years later, King Solomon. Just trying to put it in perspective for you. I've been throwing out some cultural stuff in this series, and in this one I want to throw out a couple things. Number one, dust. Jesus told his disciples, if a town doesn't accept you, shake your dust off your feet. Well, why was that even a thing? Well, they didn't have asphalt and cement and sidewalks. And so travelers often needed to clean the dust off after their travels. With that said, throwing dust at somebody was a sign of disrespect. Probably because, same as shake the dust off your feet. Dust, meant you were dirty. That's why Jesus got down and washed the feet of his disciples. The feet were dirty and nobody had done it that day. And that was something the servants had to do. Usually the lowest of the servants, maybe the youngest, the newest servant, whatever. Another cultural thing I wanted to throw out was musical instruments. In Psalms and other books, we read about some musical instruments. Sometimes we read, depends on the translation, something about stringed instruments. Probably something like a guitar. We read about harps and we get that. Trumpets, we pretty much know those. Cymbals, we got it. Organs. When the translators use the word organ in the Bible, it's thought it was probably something more closely resembling bagpipes. Scholars will dispute that one as well. So, short lesson today, but hopefully it'll help you a little bit understand the books of poetry. May God bless you as you listen to this. Have a good week. Enjoy life. Bye.